Hello, how are you? So welcome to the States of Splendor Thoughtstream number 10. It's been over 2 years that we didn't issue a new States of Splendor podcast or Thoughtstream, and that is due to many causes, mainly, let's just say, the economy and also some tragedy in my family. So after having almost abandoned States of Splendor, I'm back on track and decided that life is too short to abandon things. This life is very short, and one contributes a very small amount of input into this world, and so I decided to continue. And today, for the 10th States of Splendor Thoughtstream, we have actually a very interesting guest, because the subject of today's Thoughtstream, now maybe I should introduce you to the concept of a Thoughtstream. So this is not a usual podcast, it's a rather subject from which flows a thought stream, and for approximately 1 hour you'll have some images that are always related to the actual subject of the thought stream, and one thought brings us to another, which brings us to another, and it's very conducive to stimulate the imagination and also to eventually a state of flow. It's very good when you're actually going to sleep. It's the ideal media product to consume when you want to go to sleep, all the while stimulating your intellect with very intriguing subjects and thoughts. So today, for the occasion, we have a very interesting guest, and the subject, the official subject for today's thought stream, is rekindling relevance for older technology. Now, older technology does not necessarily mean something bygone. If you take the broom, for example, the broom did not go away when the vacuum cleaner came about. In just the same way, the radio didn't disappear when television came about. And so there can be simultaneously different relevances for different levels of technology. Today, this is a subject that kind of naturally imposed itself, because for all sorts of different reasons, which we're going to get to inside the thought stream, there's all sorts of constraints that are making people look for more specialized tech, or more economical tech, or more durable tech. Because right now, with planned obsolescence and new models of subscription for software, where you actually don't own the software and you have to pay each month to access it, and it's more and more expensive to use. And so there are other alternatives that are actually more, in many cases, not in all cases, and actually in a small amount of cases, which are actually beneficial to the user. I talked about some software that was more difficult to access now, or more expensive. There's also the phenomenon of the new Macs, which unfortunately have their hard drives welded in, so you can't change them. Before, you used to be able to buy a new hard drive and have it installed in your Mac and have it running new again. This is no longer possible, and this is in the same vein as planned obsolescence. Actually, it's exactly planned obsolescence. There's the software model where there's the monthly subscription. There's also the Kindle scandal, where actually e-readers is quite a competitive market, and recently there was Kindle that was kind of decried for having changed their model, whereas you actually don't own the book that you purchase, you just access it through the Kindle software, which allows you then to read it, but the book is never in your actual possession. The data is not in your possession. And more this is what we see, which is actually good for the lucrative side of business, and sometimes for a large amount of users is actually quite practical and a pragmatic way to just access your products. But for other kinds of users, it's not necessarily the preferred choice. So what we see in the light of this is that books, by opposition to electronic books or books that we more and more listen to audiobooks in our car, or when we just do some work, we have a book going on, that we don't use the cognitive effort to read and imagine. This has, by opposition, made true physical books become, some of them become irrelevant, but another part becoming kind of like luxury products that are quite enticing to use. Same thing for vinyl record collection, which at the first play is actually a perfect audio product. And now with DJs and all the such, they have never been sold as much as today. But at the same time, more DJs use the virtual turntables and they don't actually use physical vinyls, but in some cases they actually take out the vinyls, and that's like a luxury set. So if there's one side of the economy that's becoming more service oriented, there still is the object orientation for certain products that is becoming narrower, but at the same time having more value. So today we invited a well-known YouTuber who's actually an expert on this question, and he explores this phenomenon in his YouTube channel. His name is Spencer's Adventures. His channel emphasizes low-tech option and puts them in a new light of practicality. His channel emphasizes a kind of frugal lifestyle, which is more and more in vogue actually. On Spencer's Adventures, you can regularly see he has thoughtful insights on how to achieve and use different low-tech tools in a way that's helpful for everyday life, as well as work and for leisure. So I hope you'll enjoy today's podcast. We also obviously have the Splendor show and tell, in which we'll have just that luxury item that had quite the cultural impact in its time. It's actually a physical book, but you'll see precisely what it is later on in the Thoughtstream. And at the same time, finally, we have the Hindsight Chronicle, in which we explore a bygone phenomenon of world culture, and we put it together with a cultural phenomenon that is actually still in existence. So I hope you're going to enjoy this finally arrived new edition of the States of Splendor Thoughtstream. It's the number 10, and let's get this Thoughtstream started, and enjoy. Bye-bye. Hello, how are you? Welcome to the SOS Thoughtstream number 10. As you know, today's theme is rekindling relevance for older technology. Now, today's main event is definitely the interview that we have from Spencer's Adventures with Spencer himself. And this will be directly related to the core subject of rekindling relevance for older technology. And of course, we're going to have the Splendor show and tell with a surprisingly interesting object that's related to the older technology theme of today's Thoughtstream. And also we'll have the Hindsight Chronicle. So now, first of all, let's start, as we usually do the SOS podcast, let's start the SOS Thoughtstream with some brief news. Now, for those who've been following States of Splendor these past years, you probably have been aware that the notion of terroir is often explored in States of Splendor. That's because it's often something that's adjacent to splendor. For those who haven't been following, the terroir is difficult to translate, but it's a concept that encapsulates all the specificities of a specific ecosystem. It can roughly translate as a sense of place that is reflected in different products or in different cultural emanations from a said terroir or a said ecosystem. It's often explored in wine, but it's present in much more. It's present as well in tequila, in coffee, and tea, but also in non-gastronomical products such as in music, in literature, in aesthetics, and even in architecture and furniture design. So splendor in the SOS concept, the States of Splendor, is not pleasure as such or entertainment. The splendor that we talk about is a mysterious echo of absolute perfection that transpires from authentic excellence. Terroir is the reality, the vessel from which, not exclusively, but quite frequently, authentic splendor emanates. So too frequently, terroir is relegated to luxury products or is put on as a mask or lipstick on a pig to hide imposture. However, much work is done to make authentic terroir splendor more accessible to the common person. It's often done on the regional level because terroir is a specific region, and terroirs vary greatly from one product to another. Terroir relative to cheese may overlap another terroir that's relative to wine, although generally they all are in the same vein. So they, even though sometimes overlap, most of the time they're distinct entities. And terroirs vary thus in size, and so they can vary from like a city, a very large city, to a very small village. Actually, it can be comparable to usually like 2 or 3 villages. That's a median size of a terroir. Now, as I said previously, terroir is not necessarily something relegated only to gastronomical products or edible products. Terroir definitely is a much more large concept, and it can be illustrated by different manifestations of the concept of terroir that are appearing all around the world, actually. Even if you go to a supermarket in China, you can find that in the wine section, the terroir concept is used for promotional purposes. However, the notion of terroir has also been seen encapsulating other larger cultural span, if you like. So this can bring us to the exhibition that is going to take place quite soon in London at the Sarabande Foundation. It's an exhibition done by a Ghanaian artist named Kobe Martin, and the title of his exhibition is simply Terroir. And in this exhibition, of course, it's an immersive art exhibition that explores the notion of terroir from the perspective of the Ghanaian, and it brings forth the specificity of the different terroirs that exist in Ghana. That he incorporates different various metaphors to bring out the uniqueness of the stone, the land, and the situation of the people in this country, using video games such as Street Fighter to reiterate the notion of character selection and of imagining the future in a positive way, and the notion of survival, which is analogous to the Street Fighter situation. Using these tools evokes the unique terroirs that can be found throughout Ghana, and we're definitely not talking about gastronomy here. It's the terroir, the cultural terroir that exists in Ghana. So this is one example of terroir. There also are other examples, and countless. I'm just selecting some at random here. Another example that takes terroir more at the gastronomical level, but that goes a little bit further, but still is, first of all, gastronomical, is an event like the Terroir Symposium, which you can find in Calgary, actually. It just took place in the end of May 2026. And it's a trade show, a kind of trade show that puts forth all the culinary arts that exist in Calgary. Actually, it's a 20-year-old trade show. This year they celebrated their 20th year, and it started in Toronto, but they moved a few years ago in Calgary, and now Calgary has responded perfectly well. They just started out as a small event, and then many chefs wanted to participate, and they kind of created a culinary culture in Calgary, which focuses on the uniqueness of the potential of the culinary arts in the Calgary area. And it's done through competitions and different restaurants that offer different events, and it's quite a success. And this is a kind of event that you can find all over the place in many countries, and it's something that tends to bring forth excellence in local talent, so it's quite interesting. Now, if we go to a more traditional celebration of terroir, we can have events like the annual event that happens just naturally. It's this type of notion of terroir is something that is conducive to low tech, because it doesn't need any new tech, but it does need to continue to be able to put forth the products that are made with this activity. And this activity is the sheep herding activities that will take place not far from Montpellier in the Languedoc region in the south of France.
And what this event is Transhumance. Transhumance is an event, it's a natural event. It's actually something that has to do with nomadic activity. There is nomadic shepherds, and during the summer when the temperature makes a lot of flowers come forth, it's time for the sheep to come out of the farm and go up in the mountains and day and night be able to chew flowers and be free. And so this is quite a happy occasion, and so the transhumance event happens, and there's 800 sheep that come at the base of the mountain, and the people can come and meet the sheep. And these are traditional sheep actually that are related to the terroir for centuries actually, and it's a specific race of sheep. Is the Cossenard sheep, which do a specific type of cheese, and they get ready to go up on the mountain, but just before they get paraded in front of the people. And there's a few demonstrations of sheepdogs and what their talents can enable them to do, and it's quite impressive actually. And then there's also obviously a wine and cheese tasting and a market showcasing local cheeses and different products that are made not only from these sheep but from local artisans. And this is not a luxury event, and the products that are sold are not really premium luxury brands. It's quite accessible to the common person. Even though the price of everything is going up, it's still accessible to the common person. And this is a quite natural event, and right after you can see the happy sheep that kind of possibly even know that the time has come for them to go up the mountain, and they can just freely eat those flowers again. And in exchange with this contract, they give the milk and we get their cheese. And these are very happy sheep. So that's a really good example of terroir and what it is. Of course, the terroir does not have to be exploited in a centuries-long tradition. It can also be a recent initiative that has been made and that reflects its own terroir. Now, there is one that is not exactly a terroir product, but it's an initiative all about local talent and do-it-yourself, and it's has been done by an individual in Barcelona, in Catalonia, in Spain. It started in 2007. The name of this man is Chris de Decker, and he started a magazine that relates to today's guest and his subject, and his magazine is called Low Tech Magazine. What he does is he operates his magazine himself in a way that is perfectly sustainable. He actually runs his website on the blog was published, and then it became a website that actually printed versions of itself. And the website is completely self-sufficient, and it works out of solar power. So sometimes it's kind of offline, but most of the times it's functional. And it's quite a feat that this man operated, and it's operating in a constant way. And it's the articles that are shared are in the same frugal mentality and low-tech vein as Spencer's Adventures. It is kind of the answer to what we find in the consumer culture and consumer society with the planned obsolescence and products like that. It's a kind of response to be able to find solutions for this and make them sustainable solutions. So it's a quite interesting magazine that you should probably check out actually. It's solar.lowtechmagazine.com.
And now it's time for the SOS Thoughtstream's main event. One night only at the Civic Auditorium, Monster Trucks. No, it's actually not the main event. The main event is our conversation that we're going to have with Spencer's Adventures. Spencer from Spencer's Adventures. Now, to give you a little bit of context, we must go back to a notion that is a design notion, and we can see it prevalently in aesthetics, in music, and in just various arts and design. It's the school of minimalism. It aims to subtract the surroundings and the externalities of a said subject. So, for example, in music, you could see in a silent track, in silence, the subtle tone takes on a new life.
or in the visual arts on a neutral background, or a black background, or a completely white background, or a neutral background, the subtleties of simple traits kind of come back to life. They take on a new notion because the perception is different, because there is concentration and focus. So similarly, the low-tech movement and digital minimalism aims to have an individual's entire focus, to focus the individual entirely in the present activity, supported only by specialized or low-tech objects. Supported by specialized or more frugal tech, digital minimalism, i.e. extracting oneself for a given time from the fast-paced digital environment and social media, etc., and the centralized tech objects such as the iPhone, iWatch, iPad, and just subtracting ourselves from that, it labels more focus and concentration, and most of all, the appreciation of a studied object or an exercise of action. So in this way, this kind of frugality and low-tech digital minimalism is conducive to a greater perception and presence of splendor in one's everyday life, regardless of the epoch in which one lives. It's with this in mind that I was amazed when I found Spencer's Adventures channel on YouTube. He's a Canadian YouTuber that takes low-tech frugality as really a way of life. And he's kind of having it unravel for people in a really beautiful way. It's what we call in French art de vivre, an art of life. So Spencer kindly accepted to join us for an extended, very interesting chat on this subject. So without further ado, here is the conversation with Spencer from Spencer's Adventures.
Hey, Spencer.
Hey Patrick, how's it going?
I'm fine. How are you?
Very good, thanks.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, great to meet you too. Thanks for having me on.
So, could I just ask you like just an introductory question? Because I'm kind of curious. You started this channel and you work in cinema, right? What do you do, kind of?
I do, yeah. I'm a camera person, so I work for kind of TV mainly, but also like documentaries and things like that. So yeah,
Oh,
I've worked in the film industry in Canada for the last 7 years or something like that. Yeah, so been in
okay.
the lighting department and done things like that on commercials with the really big lights up on cranes and things like that. That's how I got my start.
Oh,
And then
that's
eventually I got into doing television as well. And now I do a lot of travel TV.
okay.
I'm
Cool.
traveling right now for work right now. So we travel all around Canada and we tell stories about small towns on the one show that I'm on.
Well,
So
that's
it's
it.
a lot of fun. It's right up my alley.
It's something I would be interested in as well. Yeah, it's like the subject, like going to a small town and finding unique things about that town. Yeah,
For sure.
that's appreciated. So you developed a liking for low tech. Is there like a reason for this, or like what? Why? How did it
Yeah,
start?
it was kind of an outgrowth, like my interest in low tech was kind of an outgrowth of I think something that everybody was feeling around this time. It was around 2020.
Yeah.
And at that time, a lot of people went online who weren't before. A lot just because of the world circumstances, like a lot of jobs went online that weren't before, and just people socializing all took place online as well.
Mhm.
So a big part of my job, especially around that time, I was doing a lot of editing for people. So I was spending a lot of time on a screen for work. And then I was finding myself spending even more time on a screen after work.
Right.
And, I think with that came a little bit of burnout and just kind of a recognition of, I don't know, like a lack of fulfillment. I was a little bit more like anxious. And I guess that's also partly due to the circumstances of that time, but also just from being online. I think it was just a little bit of that kind of junk food feeling where it's not super good for you, but you can't stop. And at that time, I kind of started to look for a way out. And growing up, I grew up without all of this technology around. Like I didn't get my first cell phone until I was in university. So previous to that, I kind of remember the just a different feeling growing up when tech was at a little bit of a different stage, and I kind of longed to get back there. And that's kind of what led me to these simpler tools, which at first just meant adopting older tools that I would have used growing up. And then now it's kind of taken a different approach where I'm looking to also newer tools that are kind of addressing the issues of the day. So
Mm.
it's been kind of an interesting thing that's been happening over the last maybe 2, 3 years that I've been really thinking about this.
Oh, okay. So if I understand correctly, you're saying like the outside tech environment influences our inside psychological environment, and to change the outside tech has an influence on your inner well-being, if you want to.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do think so. I think that that is the goal of a lot of these tech tools as well, is to influence behavior. I think a lot of the big tech companies, they utilize these tools in order to manipulate behavior for the ends of profit. And I think that also does have an impact on mental health. And I think taking away a little bit of that smart technology also means taking back a little bit of control over that. And I found that my mental state has definitely improved
Mm.
over the time that I've been, kind of stepping back a little bit, not completely stepping away from those tools. We're on a computer right now. I'm on a MacBook right now, and I still use, high tech stuff at all times, but it's not something that I'm just trying to be 100% immersed in 24/7, which is, I think, the way that things seem to be kind of moving.
Hmm. So yeah, well that was a little bit related to my next question. The second question has to do with the fact that even though you're interested in old technologies, it doesn't mean that you're entirely focused on old technologies. You just
Mhm.
use them in today's environment and use the best of today's technology to accomplish your goals. But when you go towards old technologies, do you ever have this feeling of like there's kind of a solitude involved? Because social media has the illusion of being where it's at, where everybody's at. But when you're in old technology, which often translates to like unconnected offline technology, in this day and age, that's kind of an awkward feeling. How do you, is it actually a bad thing, or is it a good thing?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, social media definitely gives the impression that you are connected, but I think the kind of just general mental health stats of the outlook of young people today who are the most online kind of bears out that that doesn't really connect. It doesn't necessarily mean that when you're connected at all times that you feel like you're part of a community or you're really feeling mentally part of something. And I think sometimes being offline does have a bit of you do feel like you're missing out. There is just, I still have social media for work purposes, but I don't use it nearly as much as I used to. And there is a little bit originally that fear of missing out kind of concern that you're just not kind of keeping up with anything. But it was always kind of a shallow level of keeping up anyway, like a like or something like that. Just
Mm.
seeing an old friend's post on Facebook and just giving it a like is a very shallow level of interaction. Whereas taking that time, you don't have the same breadth potentially of interactions by seeing what every single person that your 300 friends are up to, but you're able to call that old friend up that you haven't talked to in a year or two and maybe have an hour conversation with them. And it kind of maybe gives a little bit more space. And maybe because of that lack of wider connection that you find online, it kind of gives you a need to reach out to somebody and you can connect with them on a deeper level. So I think there's a give and take with it. It is definitely a different type of connection, but I definitely argue that the newer level of connection that we're finding online, where it's a lot but not very deep, isn't necessarily better.
Mm. Something I noticed personally when for example, we all love listening to podcasts on YouTube, but if we look at a paper magazine, it's a different experience. And if in the beginning we might have the reflex of wanting to go see if we got a like on a post or something, but it's just a question of time. After a certain time lapse, we become like attuned to the magazine and really there's like the suspension of disbelief, and we start to enter the domain. And so after a certain lapse of time, we kind of get back in tune to it or something. But that's just personally.
No, I
Um,
agree with you. I think that's a good point. I think like there is an adjustment period. I feel like when I switched to using my iPod, for example, as a way to just kind of disconnect while also still listening to podcasts or music, there still was that kind of reflex to want to pull it out and check it to see if there was a notification or anything like that. I'm missing something.
yeah, yeah,
But after a little while, you're kind of like, there's nothing there. That's the point of this.
yeah,
And then
exactly.
you can actually immerse in it on a deeper level than you ever could with that kind of more all-in-one tool.
Hmm. There's the question of the work of the imagination. Like my mother would always, when I was small, tell me you should read books because if you look at a movie, it's there are good movies out there, but your imagination is not doing the whole work. If you read a book, you have to create the whole setting in your mind and everything. Whereas if you look at a movie, it's already kind of prefabricated in a certain sense. So do you notice this kind of mental stimulation that comes with the use of certain lower tech tools?
Yeah, I was thinking about that too, and I definitely agree with it, especially where books are concerned. I think there's something just with reading a book that it kind of gives you the space to actually impart your own thoughts and your own kind of worldview on it and let that book kind of do an exchange with you and you kind of it changes you.
Hmm.
Whereas I feel like so much of the stuff that we do nowadays, our activities, is passive consumption of content. And it's we're not playing an active role in engaging with that thing. Oftentimes we're scrolling on our phones, just looking at flashing things like in videos on Instagram or watching a YouTube video or watching Netflix or something like that. And we're just kind of laying back and taking it honestly. And with simple tools, especially, I think because of the fact that there's not all of this flash and all of these notifications and pizzazz coming at you at all times and just something that's constantly feeding you, it gives you a little bit of space to breathe and a little bit of space, I guess, to let your mind wander and your mind do some work.
Hmm.
So yeah, I find that myself, like a lot of my favorite interests could just be, photography, just going for a photo walk around my neighborhood. And I'll leave my phone behind for something like that. And there's a moment there, I'm still very focused and I'm still locked in at the task, but there's also that moment for your mind to wander. And I always just find that there's just a little bit of a deeper connection with that type of thing. Whereas again, it's that junk food idea, I think. I think that when you're consuming content in that passive way, it feels a little wrong. There's a bit of a guilt to it. And I don't think that's just guilt in itself. I think it's because you know that it's not really doing much for you. I think in small amounts, it can be tasty, but I think in large amounts, it can be largely unfulfilling and it's not going to really fill you up. Whereas I find that so many offline tasks and activities, if I'm even just watercolor painting, that's another thing I like to do. And I'm not good at it, but it's something that I just enjoy doing. And it's in those moments that are a little bit more spare. They're not completely filled up with stimulus that I find them the most nourishing. And I think that just has to do with it's kind of like they say nowadays that boredom is almost extinct.
Hmm.
And I think that because we can constantly fill it with any sort of notification or flashing thing on our phone, getting into a video or just scroll something, we're able to fill up every moment of boredom. And I think that's where, good ideas and creativity really can flourish. And that is in those moments of boredom. So I think that just because that the low tech kind of approaches to things, just writing in a journal rather than typing on your laptop, where you have so many other ways that you can distract yourself. I think there's something that can happen there that allows for a little bit more creative flow.
Okay, so it's kind of like a mental space. It allows space for certain mental disposition, if you will.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, you've arrived. It's the most interesting part of the. It's of course you're on traveling now, so you don't have your low tech tools with
I don't
you.
have as many of them. Yeah, I don't have it. I have a few, but I don't have as many.
Oh, cool. I brought
I have a
mine.
couple.
I have a manual coffee grinder.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Those are great. And see the
It,
power goes out, you're grinding your coffee.
yeah, exactly. And it's like, I don't know, there's something rewarding of drinking the coffee that you ground yourself. It would be like, of course, you can't always do it. Like sometimes if you're late for work, you need to use technology, but
Yeah,
have
I understand.
the chance to do it from A to Z manually. It has a distinct feeling. Anyways, so uh, as I was telling you, I would like to have a few examples of your preferred low-tech items.
So, I mean, there's definitely a bunch of them, and I definitely that's a lot of what I get into on my YouTube channel. People love to hear about those types of tools, the things that really excite me. But for me, I'm still a tech guy. Like I still work in technology, really in the filmmaking space.
Mhm.
working with very high-end cameras and different computers and tech tools. So I definitely am interested in those types of things and really good pieces of technology, but it's technology that kind of gets out of the way and allows you to kind of live your best life without taking too much from you. It gives a lot to you without taking a lot. And that's the kind of things that I have curated as my kind of preferred tools. So a couple of the things I can show you is for example, I'm on the road, as you said, and
Okay.
I brought some books with me. I usually bring some paper books. I bring my journal with me all the time
Oh, yeah.
because yeah, I like to just journal a few times a week, and that's just a paper and a pen. I can pull that out actually too. Um, yeah, so I have this like journal that I carry around, which is just it's just a normal journal. I got this one from my girlfriend's mom for Christmas, and I sewed this or made this cover out of leather for it.
I was going to say it's a nice cover, a leather cover.
Yeah, I just got this scrap leather at a store downtown Toronto, and then made this with some elastic and it just bind all of my books into it. And then I have a fountain pen, and that's just my way to do it. I love refilling the pen. I
Oh,
have a big like well of ink at home, and I fill it up before I go. And that's one of my favorite things to do because just getting your ideas out on the page. So much for me, journaling is just working through things. It's almost like a little bit of like a therapy session or something like that. I'm really just working through what, fears or things that I'm excited about or making plans. So that's one of my favorite tools, and I use it every day almost. I go out in the morning when I'm at home, maybe at like 7 in the morning, especially in the summer. I do this, and I would bring a cup of coffee out and sit in the backyard. All devices stay inside. It's just the coffee and the journal and maybe a pair of binoculars. And I'll sit out there and I'll do some writing for about an hour.
that's nice. I should do that.
Yeah,
It's
it's a lot of fun, honestly. And it's just nice, once again, that space, because you're not getting distracted every time you take a
Mhm.
second and think, like, oh, I wonder what this sort of thing is. Something comes up into your head while you're journaling, and you maybe would think in this smart world, oh, I should pick my phone up and just quickly check that thing. And not having that available to you, it just kind of puts you in a very different space.
Mhm.
So, anyways, I normally bring books with me, but because I'm traveling, I didn't want to bring a lot. So I actually brought this e-reader with me. This is one of my favorite low-tech tools. This is the Books Palma 2. And I was actually sent this to review. I had a Kobo e-reader that I use, but this one is actually a really neat looking e-reader, and it's very small, as you see. It's very similar in size to basically a larger smartphone,
Okay.
and it has the similar kind of it runs an Android operating system. So it is a full Android device, but it just doesn't have the ability to do texting and calling. There's no SIM card in it.
So, okay.
But you are able to use the internet and do all of the other things that you could do on a tablet, but it has an e-ink screen. So what's specifically nice about that is it's black and white. So it is, as you see here, it has that kind of Android look to it, but it's a full e-ink screen. And it just is a really nice book. It's very nice for reading ebooks. It doesn't need any sort of backlight or anything on it in order to read. The backlight is off right now, and it's just reflecting the ambient light. So it's a lot better on your eyes to read with. I've actually, I've read a study that was, I think, in part funded by the e-ink people, but they had said that it's actually slightly better for your eyes to read on the e-ink screen than it is to read a book, because modern books are actually treated with like a fluoride, I think, or fluorescent like chemical in order to make the page more reflective. It actually reflects light more harshly on some printed laminated pages. People spend a lot of time on their screens nowadays, and it's not good for our eyes. We have a rise of myopia, and people are more nearsighted than like before, just because of how much time we're spending on our screens per day. So this is a little bit better for that, just because it's a little bit less harsh on your eyes, because there's no light coming from the back of the panel. And this allows me to carry around a lot of different books, and it allows me to carry it around very portably.
And is it like the new Kindle fiasco, or are you able to own your own books?
Yes, okay, so you know about that. So yes, the cool thing about this is you fully can own your own books. Books, I don't even know, I don't think they have a store for purchasing ebooks, but you can purchase them from places that sell ebooks without any sort of copy protection built in. And the cool thing is where Kindle has locked you into their ecosystem now that you can't take your books with you. Because this is an Android e-reader, you can kind of get around that because you can download any app that any phone could have. So you can download your Kindle app on here. And this is not a Kindle device, but you can read it like you could on your laptop or your phone.
I see. Okay.
So
Oh,
it
well,
kind of opens up the opportunities of which other brands of ebooks you can read because this is a full Android device. So it's also good for like reading blogs as well, because I also like to read a lot of different blogs that kind of write on similar things that I'm interested in. And then oftentimes that's on a computer or that's on a phone. And those are just with normal backlit LCD screens. And I don't like to look at those for a long period of time. So to have an internet experience, but with an e-ink screen is definitely a better way to go as well. So I really appreciate that.
interesting. Never heard about it. Is it this a new device or?
It's relatively new. This is the Books Palma 2, so it's the second iteration. But yeah, Books is kind of it's a higher end device. It's priced more in the like realm of a tablet. Not it's a little bit more than you'd be paying for a Kindle or something like that. But you are getting a lot more functionality than you're getting from something like a Kindle, where those devices can just do an e-reader. You're able to, get multiple different e-reading apps through it and also use internet and whatever else you would want to use. So it's a pretty interesting little tool. I also really like my Kobo. That's what I actually had prior to this. And Kobo is just the alternative to Kindle. And
Oh, I
you're
see.
able to, yeah, you're able to buy the books through them. And oftentimes you're able to get books without any sort of copy protection through them. They're not as bad as Amazon, but they're not perfect either. I think having an Android option like this gives you the most flexibility.
Hmm. And did
Yeah.
you sometimes read real books as well? Did you like that?
Oh yes. Yeah. I prefer to read real books. I'll show you. I have one with me right now. Um, this one I've been reading this week, and it's called How to Survive Without a Salary.
Oh, that's yeah. You can send me a copy. I'd like.
Yeah, this is it's really good. It's Charles Long, and it's as a freelancer, I found it very interesting. It's kind of like I've been interested for a while in the financial independence retire early community, if you've heard of that, FIRE. And
Not
this is
specific.
kind of a similar thing.
Okay.
Yeah, this is like I think this book first came out in the 80s, and then this is a read second edition from the 90s. And it's pretty interesting. It just basically talks about living a bit of a conserver lifestyle is what he calls it. And it's just, living below your means and kind of finding ways to have the same quality of life as the average person while doing it a little bit more efficiently. And that can cut your cost by, 30% or 60%. And because of that, you're able to live off of 30 or 60% less income. And therefore you need to work a lot less. So
Interesting.
yeah, it's interesting. It's, putting together an income as well based on a lot of smaller individual jobs rather than having to continuously have the drip of a salary coming in.
That's quite a crucial transition that I'm working on myself as well. You just have to be perseverant and methodical, I guess. I should get a copy of that book. It's interesting that we can find like old books from previous decades and find them, and sometimes we kind of wonder if the information is available or not available offline.
Uh-huh.
So you're interested in these types of things, but you're not alone. Did you notice a kind of a trend of more and more people being interested in these types of low tech alternatives?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there definitely is an influx of people interested in the kind of digital minimalism, low tech thing. And I think that it's not just coming from one demographic either. It's coming from all ages. Like I've seen people who are, a bit older than me, like closer to my parents' age, who are saying like, I find myself online a lot more. I find that my job requires me to be online a lot more. I find that most of my recreation is taking place online or on screens, and people are getting tired of it. And then of course there's young people as well. And Gen Z, Gen Alpha, those people, they just have a completely online experience nowadays, especially most of them have grown up going to school, maybe partially online, if not sometimes almost fully online, many of their classes taking place online. I know when I grew up, going to my friend's house after school and playing Nintendo 64 was like, that was the thing to do. Whereas most kids play video games online at their own houses and then meet online. And you have young people as well who are curating their entire life to perform on social media. And I think all of that becomes extremely taxing. And I think we can all recognize that there are smart tools that are, in fact, tools and quite beneficial to us. Like we couldn't do this in the 90s, right? And this is quite awesome that we're able to actually, communicate. And you're in Quebec, right?
Yeah, in
Yeah.
Montreal.
Yeah, exactly. So we're in completely different provinces and we're able to connect and have this conversation. And that's a great thing. That's a huge benefit of technology. But there is a little bit of a push, as you've seen with Silicon Valley and that kind of type, to have us online as much as possible. If it's the chip in the arm, if it's the Neuralink, things like this, there's this idea that we should be spending almost all of our time as avatars and being online. And I think as that kind of continues to progress and move toward that end, I think more and more people are kind of getting burned out from that and are looking for a balance. So I do think that there's more interest in that, and I think it's going to continue to grow.
So did you think that the Gen Z, because we're in Canada, so it's not Gen Z,
Mhm.
it's Gen Z
Mhm.
and Gen Alpha maybe will perceive the value of the real world, or do
I
you?
think so.
Yeah.
I think it won't be everyone. I think like just like this, it's like we're still a niche community of people who are thinking about this.
Mhm.
I think there's always going to be people who it's going to take them a little bit longer to kind of come around to these ideas, but I think people are tired. I think generally, whether you think technology is the answer or you're a little bit more skeptical and want to maybe mediate your relationship a bit more, I think people are getting just tired of being online all the time and the effects that that has.
So what I gather is like it's not all one or the other. It's basically both are useful and have their utility is what you're saying. So it's not like we're not talking about a Luddite community. It's more like using low tech in certain instances. Is that my understanding correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I think people often mischaracterize me as a Luddite, and they don't even know the historical background of that term. And I think it's a
Yeah,
little bit more
that too.
powerful once you start to understand that. But I also would say that not at all. It's a funny kind of a comparison, but I often say that I take an approach similar to the Amish, and that is an evaluative perspective on technology. I think that there is a bit of an idea nowadays that every new technology that comes out is an innovation and that it is progress and
Mhm.
that it is either adapt and adopt that technology, or you are a Luddite. You're seen as some sort of backwards person for not wanting to accept every new technology that comes about. But so much of the technologies that we need, they don't all just have, sorry, not all the technologies that we need, but so many of the technologies that come out, they're not 100% net positive. There are some things that could be improved upon. And we see this with the dumb phone community as well. There's a lot of people who, different companies that are creating phones nowadays. There's 3 great phones that have come out this year. The minimal phone, which looks like a BlackBerry, but it has an e-ink style screen. It has an actual physical keyboard. There's the Light Phone 3 that came out, which is again kind of a very smartphone looking device, but it's very restricted. And there's a device that I talked about recently on the channel called the Mudita Compact. And that is another privacy centric e-ink again screen that has all of the kind of modern features you would want in a smartphone, as far as like it has maps, it has your ability to put music and podcasts on there, but it doesn't have any of the distracting apps that people find as a loss of having those devices, like kind of a downside. So I don't see those as a reversion to an older type of technology. I see that as a correction of
Yeah,
the things that we don't so much like about the newer technologies. It keeps the USB-C charging that everybody appreciates. It keeps the hot spotting if you want to get a tablet or a laptop connected to the internet on the go, but it's not giving you those infinite tools in that little form factor in your pocket that just can be a huge distraction. I think to a level, to a degree, having a level of boundary in your life is actually a way to give yourself more freedom. I think by giving yourself infinite choice, you often can find yourself spinning in circles and not really making any forward motion. So I think limiting yourself in a way is one of the best ways to give yourself the best chance at freedom.
mm, that's interesting. Wow. So
Yeah.
ideas come to mind. Many great albums were made with time constraints. This thought of not wanting certain excesses in tech and concentrating on low tech or vintage tech is actually having an impact on new technology. So it's definitely not Luddite.
Hmm.
It's back and forth going there. Do you see like a common denominator? Is there like a big line of difference between low and high tech being on and offline? And the second part of that question is, do you see that certain of your low tech items, do you see like a that they acquire a certain value with time? Is there like, do you see like certain low tech with time becomes irrelevant and unnecessary, and certain tech acquires value because of their pertinence in today's world?
Good idea. Yeah, I'll split it up into two parts in my head. So like I don't think so much the demarcation for low tech and high tech is necessarily online.
Okay.
For me, I think that definitely is a way to look at it, but for me, I think it has to do with the use cases of these tools. I think oftentimes a single purpose tool is to me a more low tech tool, something that can be do one thing and do it very well. I think that it is a more focused use of a tool and it has less distraction. Like a smartphone can do everything, but it also has a lot of distractions within because of that. Whereas, like for example, I'll show you one more tool that I have here, and that is my photo camera. So I have this photo camera I've been using lately for doing wildlife photography, and yeah, it's made by Olympus,
Okay.
and it's a pretty high end camera, and it's a very
Looks nice.
high tech tool for sure. Like this thing can take 120 photos per second.
Oh yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it's very fast. So technically that's a high tech tool, right? But in my mind, it kind of gives me that low tech experience because there's nothing distracting in here. It's just the camera. It does camera extremely well.
Hmm.
And I can leave every other tool behind if I want, and I can have an immersive, enjoyable, and also peaceful experience with
Huh.
something that is high tech.
Does it help you concentrate?
Yeah, it does. It does help me concentrate, I think. It it helps me concentrate, I think, not because it has anything in it that is specifically, helping focus, but I think it's because it's lacking all of the distracting elements. It's not like it's a smart camera that tethers to my phone and my notifications come in my viewfinder while I'm framing up my shot, right? It's maybe a low tech tool in a sense because it gets out of the way and it allows me to kind of do what I want to do with it without anything kind of holding me back. So there's that for sure. And then the second question you asked was about the value.
Time.
That for sure is something. The iPod is a great example. 5 or 10 years ago, you could get any iPod for probably $5. Whereas now the iPod classics, the ones from around 2007, they
Yeah.
especially they're modifiable. Apple didn't glue all of the components into the case, so it's a lot easier to pull things out and upgrade. And you can buy these for $200 for sometimes more than they were when they were new.
Oh, that's
And yeah, you've seen it with records as well. Vinyl records have come back, and record players are now existing and are being sold again, and they are quite pricey.
mhm.
Vinyl records are being printed with like from new artists. You can probably get Taylor Swift's album on vinyl, and you're paying 40 something dollars or $50 for that. So there definitely is a little bit more value being placed on these tools. And even again, in the camera space, old digital cameras are very popular with Gen Z. They are kind of sick of carrying around that smartphone. And I've actually seen tons of Gen Z people picking up old, like I used to have this one camera and I sold it to somebody who is Gen Z. And it was called the Kodak Megapixel, and it had just a single megapixel, and that was the boast of the name. And this person was so excited to have that because they wanted that kind of point and shoot lo-fi experience that they could leave their phone behind. Maybe they owned a flip phone or something like that, and they would bring this camera with them, and that's how they would capture their events. And those cameras have went up again in value, $100, something like that. People are paying for that because it's kind of become a bit of a trend to a degree. Some people are just interested in it for the trend, but I do believe a lot of people are interested in it because they want to actually disconnect. They're looking for something more tangible. And again, I think the smartphone has so many functions, but they're kind of intangible because they're all apps. They're all inside there. And I think people want a camera like this where they can actually hold it and they can, mess with the dials and change the settings and feel it in their hand, right? Adjust the lens. I think there's something special there.
Well, that's interesting. So, well, thanks, because now our conversation kind of you helped me understand that it's like clearly not a nostalgia thing about like vintage stuff. I mean, vintage stuff is cool, but it actually has a function in the modern world. This low-tech presence.
For
So,
sure.
well, thank you for your insight. I really appreciate, Spencer. Maybe you could talk to us about your channel if you want.
Of course. Yeah. Well, thanks very much for having me on as well, Patrick. I really appreciated it. It's been great chatting with you. Yeah, my channel is called Spencer's Adventures, and I talk on there all about simple living, frugality, and digital minimalism. Those are kind of the three pillars of the channel that I focus on. And I think they're kind of all interlinked, intertwined. And it's definitely just kind of how I live my life. It's the things that I'm experimenting with, new tools I'm trying, new kind of ideas I'm testing out to see if they work in my life, and it's a lot of fun. There's a community building around there of kind of like-minded people who are experimenting with older types of tools. And it's not Luddites. Again, it's a lot of the people in there are actually nerds. They're people who are so into technology and they're modifying their technology sometimes. They're taking computers and they're installing an operating system like Linux on it, or they're soldering their phone in order to make an old flip phone run on USB-C or something like that. They're doing these kind of projects. They're not trying to turn away from technology. They're trying to make technology work for them. And I think that's really what this whole digital minimalism thing's about. So if you are interested in that, check out Spencer's Adventures.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you, Spencer, and I agree, and hope to talk to you next time. Let's stay in touch and have a great weekend or a great week.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Patrick.
And now it's back to the basement studios nestled in the foothills of the Laurentians in Quebec, Canada, that I bring you the Hindsight Chronicle. Now, the Hindsight Chronicle on this drizzly evening. Now, the Hindsight Chronicle examines a bygone phenomenon of our culture, and we always accompany it with a phenomenon that is still in existence today. This bygone phenomenon is often, in hindsight, things become legends, and things take on a kind of silver lining, and we can, with perspective, concentrate on the positive aspects of certain phenomenon to see the splendor that lives within them. And obviously, it's interesting to look back at everyday life of a few years ago, if you remember your childhood and the period and the little small details, the aesthetics and the different atmosphere that existed at that time. It's always interesting to notice that these phenomenon that often with time become celebrated as beacons of a certain period in time. Well, while they're going on, we often do not realize that these are the beacons, but actually sometimes we have some glimpse in time and can know that we're actually riding on some actual splendor in time, and they will become legends in the future. And this is what the Hindsight Chronicle actually does. It is kind of like the seal of the view in the rear view mirror, because just as if a tree falls in the forest, does anybody hear it? If a legend existed in the past and nobody knows about it, well, it just isn't a legend. And it's in a rainy day like this that you can think of ancient legends, such as some that existed in the radio world, and one that you may very well know that's called Art Bell. Art Bell was a radiocaster that had quite simply the most popular AM radio show in existence in the history, at least of the US. His uniqueness came from his delivery and also the subjects that he explored. They were all paranormal, and he would invite just anybody, whether he believed them or not, just to relate their stories of the paranormal. And often he did open lines, and he often had people from coast to coast. That was the name of his radio program that actually still exists with George Noory. But when Art Bell used to do it, there was like this atmosphere, and he had this sonic atmosphere to go with it. You would imagine him in his small desert studio in the high desert, as he used to call it. And there was truckers calling from on the road from far-reaching places, and it was quite stimulating for the imagination to listen to such a show. It was often very late at night, and it would be something that I often went to sleep to as a child. And then he after had a show that was called Midnight in the Desert, and it was a very comforting radio man, Art Bell. So when the radio show was in existence, we didn't realize that it would actually be quite missed when he would leave, because unfortunately Art Bell passed away. He is greatly missed in the radio waves because he had kind of something like we call it je ne sais quoi, kind of special touch that made the unique atmosphere on the radio reach beyond what it usually does. Which brings us to the Hindsight Chronicles. Which kind of bygone phenomenon are we going to explore today? Today we have a Canadian phenomenon. I mean, we have to realize that this is a Canadian website, although the website was actually born in China. So we go back to a very Canadian phenomenon that unfortunately is bygone. And we have for you the Hudson Bay's Company. Now, this is a hefty company. It was one of the largest holding companies at the time. It's a company with such history, and unfortunately in 2025 completely disappeared. It was really a foundational company that accompanied the construction of Canada from the beginnings, when there was the French government that was actually trading with the First Nations, and it was quite a story. So here we go with the Hindsight Chronicle on the Hudson Bay's Company. Now, the story of the Hudson Bay Company is intrinsically linked to that of the history of Canada. It was incorporated in 1670. Why did this company appear on the radar? Well, quite simply, there was two explorers called Radisson and de Groseilliers. And this is why we still have the Radisson hotels today. They're named after these two guys. And these two guys were bent upon finding new routes and exploring the territory as far as possible, finding new pelts, quality pelts. And they had heard that actually to the north there was a sea, and the northwest was the best place where we could find the richest and fullest of furs. And so that's what they did, and they sought the permission to go explore these lands, and unfortunately they were not granted their permission by the New France government. These two, Radisson and de Groseilliers, being the rebels that they are, didn't wait for the permission, and they went anyways to the northwest and found the best of pelts. And they thought that they could convince the authorities otherwise. And they came back and they presented their pelts to the French authorities. And unfortunately, the French authorities did not appreciate that. They did not listen to their orders, and they arrested them and they seized the pelts. And so Radisson and de Groseilliers were not particularly happy, and that's what made them eventually contact the English. And so there is a few merchants from Boston who helped them to start an expedition. Eventually they were invited to go to London, and they went there in 1668, and they met with Prince Rupert. Prince Rupert had the rights to some land in the north of Canada, and Prince Rupert eventually presented Radisson and de Groseilliers to his cousin. And his cousin was Charles II. Charles II being the King of England, the King of Great Britain. And thus he awarded them a charter, and the Hudson Bay Company was incorporated in 1670. From there, quite a hefty history began. And then there was a rival company that was called the Northwest Company, and then they even fought with each other. They had small armies. They issued some money, actually, and their main business was the pelt business, which was the main business of the French government in New France, which is the ancestor of Canada. And so at that time, the French fought with the Hudson Bay Company, and one of their generals, one of their captains, actually caught all of the Hudson Bay's trading posts because they used to trade pelts with the First Nations. They would trade for various goods, but mostly for blankets, point blankets. They developed relationships with first the Cree in the Plains and the James Bay Cree, and then they opened a few more permanent trading posts. The first of them were in nowadays Ontario. From there, they started to do quite a lucrative business, and they from then on continued. And eventually, the French were defeated, and the English invaded, and Canada became a protectorate under the authority of English king. And so, therefore, the Hudson Bay Company's business was assured for the generations to come. And so the Hudson Bay Company became bigger and bigger, all the while continuing the trading business in the pelts. They started a quite famous line of department stores. Now, this is a little bit later in the 1800s. So in the 19th century, they built quite luxurious department stores that were the pride of the main Canadian cities. And it was quite interesting to notice that they would always be a presence of the fur trading industry in this business. The history was always very present in the department stores. I remember as a child I used to go there with my father, and he used to tell me stories about when he was younger. He would go there on his lunch breaks just to admire the place. And in Montreal, the Bay's department store was in one of the early buildings of Montreal, built in red stone. It was really nice, and on the top of it, at the top floor, there was a restaurant that was quite renowned because it was a restaurant that was in an authentic Art Deco decoration, and it was really splendid. It had a unique aesthetic to it, and it was really nice. My father used to go there on his breaks. I used to go there sometimes after school just to spend time because it was really interesting. Of course, when I had money, I would buy some clothes. It was really a staple place, and not only in Montreal, but in all major Canadian cities. One thing that was quite iconic at the Hudson Bay's Company is the point blanket. The Hudson Bay's point blanket has existed since the beginning of the company, or almost the beginnings, at least since the beginnings of the department stores. They're representative of the first tradings done with the Cree, and they would often trade in furs to get some blankets. The blankets were quite handy, versatile, and therefore the most popular item were those point blankets. And because of that, they have a certain aura of history when you see these products. Of course, they were made in high quality wool, and they had the Hudson Bay's stripes on them, which were reminiscent of a code that was existing in the time that they were trading point blankets. The more they had stripes, it was indicative of the size of the blanket that had a different value. And so these were translated onto the point blankets that they would sell in the actual department stores. And if you look on the screen now, you can actually see one authentic point blanket. Now, this blanket today is so iconic that they sell for approximately $600-700. It's a really unique item. And unfortunately, what happened, of course, we're talking about the Hindsight Chronicle. So you see here the royal charter that initiated the Hudson Bay's Company's history, and throughout the generations it continued, and it came to an abrupt stop in 2025. So unfortunately, nobody really understands how this company, this major company, could have nosedived this steeply so quickly. Obviously, it's because of online retail stores, online retail sales that are taking away from the department store experience. We now have pop-up stores and really minimalistic store experiences. It's much less pleasant to do so and much more bland transaction, unfortunately. These department stores really had something going, and it was only once that they closed that you realized that they were kind of a luxury. And the thing that was interesting is that the Hudson Bay's was not necessarily luxury that was unattainable for the lower classes. It was attainable for everybody. Everybody had something that they could find, at the Hudson Bays. So in 2025, unfortunately, because of terrible management, it closed down. So all of the stores in all of Canada, and even in minor cities, they all closed, and obviously there was a lot of unemployment. But there was a member of the Chinese Canadians in British Columbia that was kind of saddened by this and that wanted to save the Hudson Bay stores, at least save the most important flagship stores that you can see in the famous stone buildings of Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal. And unfortunately, her project did not come to fruition, and the Hudson Bays just completely closed down, and now there's absolutely nothing left, unfortunately. There may be this small staple here. I did one last purchase at the Hudson Bays Company in Montreal in 2025, and here is the bag, and you can still have small mementos that you can find on eBay, etc. And the last trace of Hudson Bays is now found. The intellectual property of the Hudson Bays was sold to another very, very old Canadian company called Canadian Tire. And that's not really a department store. It's not based on a pleasant customer experience, but it nevertheless is a store, and people can browse in the aisles, and it's another very old Canadian store, so it was kind of logical that they buy the intellectual property. So they sell a few items such as cups and some aprons, and to my great surprise, they actually still sell the famous Hudson Bays point blanket. So the point blanket is still available at Canadian Tire today. Of course, the price hasn't changed. It's still around $700. But in my opinion, it is worth every cent because it's the actual same product. And it's one of the only products that the actual store closed, but the product still exists. So it's one last chance to be able to hold a piece of history with this very good quality wool blanket that will keep you warm in the autumn evenings. So that's it for the Hudson Bays Company. So it's a salute to this long history and this very important company and enterprise that was done between 1670 and 2025. Now, the Hindsight Chronicle obviously must examine a phenomenon that is filled with the same type of authentic splendor, but is still in actual existence today. So thus, here we are with the second part of the Hindsight Chronicle. Now we're going to explore a phenomenon that's still in existence, but if you'll permit me, let's put a little bit of context before, because this is related to the subject of today's Thoughtstream, which is rekindling relevance for low tech. Now, as I sit here recording this, you may hear some raindrops, and this is because, as I was saying, the explanation for why there has been 2 years that have passed, why it's been so long that a new Thoughtstream was not produced, is because of the economy. And thus, this is being recorded in my car in between two Uber clients. So we'll make the most with what we have to continue this production of the SOS Thoughtstream. And now, this second subject for the Hindsight Chronicle has to be put into context. So, as many people have been disappointed by Sony's recent announcement that they're going to stop all production of physical copies of games, this is actually not an isolated event. In these past few years, let's say since the 2020s, we've been seeing the vanishing of many quality amenities and many quality products around us. And this second subject of the Hindsight Chronicle is one of these products, but that is still in existence. As people have started to have a liking for certain low-tech specialized tools, we can see that this is related to the excessive unilateral digitalization of everything, such as video games, but such as books, and such as music, and such as pretty much everything, which is the reason why CDs are actually going up in value, and vinyl records, well, they've been up in value for quite some time, actually. So right now, more and more, everything is virtual,
copied, and many times simply represented by AI avatars. So this makes for a world that's strictly transactional, focused on cutting costs and centralizing all operations. This we see in our phone with endless apps, the reselling of your data, and trying to be able to replace every real-life function by something digital. While this is not necessarily conducive to a balanced life, we see that eliminating buildings, objects, amenities, and even human contact is not necessarily a good thing. Actually, yes, human contact is obviously eliminated by social media and everything, which gives us the illusion of social contact, just as Spencer was talking about recently. There's a notion of a third space. The third space is actually a place where society can meet and have fun, but also exchange ideas. And this was often found in your public park. It could also be found in libraries, in banks, in music stores, in parks where people would meet, and in bars and taverns, in supermarkets and cinemas, and offices, social clubs, cafes, markets, country fairs, and festivals, just to name a few. And these have been progressively eliminated, although not completely. I mean, supermarkets still exist, and there still are some third spaces, but they have a tendency to disappear. We saw this phenomenon as of maybe the 2020s, where they were replaced by digital meeting spaces. And the actual digitalization of third spaces has not really proven to be a healthy replacement. They have obviously proven to be a powerful communication and a data transport tool, but not as a replacement for real-life third spaces. So in this same perspective, if we look at the hotel industry, for example, and we can also see that the hotels have been slowly eliminating objects, employees, also eventually generating a poor customer experience based on a mere transaction. Recently, we can observe that since approximately 2019, hotels started eliminating amenities. Now, what are amenities? They are if you've been to a hotel, they're the freebies that come with a hotel. It could be slippers, or it could be soap, it can be small cream flasks, it can be certain hygienic products such as toothbrushes and sewing kits, shaving kits, and the like. They eliminated this under the guise of environmental protection, but actually it has been shown that they've done surveys with hotel clientele, and one major one was inquiring to see what aspect of a hotel is the most memorable to a user of a hotel. What makes the user experience the most pleasant and the most memorable, and is the most conducive to have them talk positively about their hotel experience to other people? Overwhelmingly, the response was the amenities, the actual objects that people can take from the hotel that are to the hotel's effigy and that serve as souvenirs, as well as little perks that make the hotel experience more durable and more appreciated by the hotel guests. Even if the hotel invests millions of dollars in redecoration every 10 years, or if it invests in multiple LCD screens or other such large investments, it does not come close to the type of satisfaction that the amenities brings. And unfortunately, they're all being eliminated, and they're forcing the hotels to invest massively into other things that can eventually be considered wasteful and not really in the vein of environmental protection. So the user experience is interesting, and we should get feedback from what hotel guests actually appreciate themselves. So the reduction of various industries to merely transactional experiences is not always to the benefit of the end user. We can see this without going to a hotel. Everybody owns a phone, or almost everybody owns a phone. I don't know if this happened to you, but regularly it happens that apps become incompatible because the hardware is not supported. And it obliges you to buy a new iPad, a new phone, a new computer, and is kind of like a forced planned obsolescence, and it obliges people to again spend their hard-earned money, and is not necessarily for the benefit of the end user, unfortunately.
if we go to a completely different industry, the tractor industry, mainly John Deere, we have heard stories recently by many farmers that John Deere, being the staple tractor used in North America for farming, the tractors have gone high-tech, which could be good and has many advantages for the user, but unfortunately before, the users were able to repair tractors themselves. And right now, the John Deere tractors have massive software in them, and that's quite complex. And they've made it so the recent tractors can only be repaired if you bring the tractor to the dealership, because they have the computer necessary to repair all software intricacies. This has frustrated many farmers, which consider this a quite substantial lowering of the consumer experience and the advantages of using their brand. Therefore, there have been other brands that have sprung forth that have been trying to respond to this new need for a repairable tractor. And this is why we've seen in Canada, in Alberta, there's a company called Ursa AG, and they have actually manufactured a John Deere alternative, if you will, although it's not really comparable. It's another kind of tractor that uses a 12-valve Cummins engine. It actually is half-priced. It's marketed as a no-tech tractor, and is highly repairable, and it's sold actually for $95,000 US, which is definitely half price. And they've seen such an enthusiasm from farmers that their company is actually booming. And so they've made a low-tech tractor that's made with new hardware, and that's a quality tractor, but that is more specialized and beneficial for end users. In certain cases, I can imagine there may be certain different types of farms that could more profit from using a high-tech John Deere tractor, but some smaller farmers, and not necessarily all very small farmers, but some small farmers have the need for such a low-tech tractor. And this is why Ursa AG is having wind in its sails these days. But now enough with the John Deere tractors, and let's get back to the subject. So the centralized high-tech is somewhat related to maximal cost optimization, also known as cost cutting. And so this is the effect that is making amenities go away in hotels and restaurants, and it also makes high-quality, lower profit margin products and businesses go away. This is why we've seen many such businesses and products disappear in recent years, such as the Hudson Bay's company that we just talked about. Also, such as other products, such as, I have two examples for you. The first one is they both are Canadian products. They were highly prized products, although when the products existed, they were just appreciated, but we didn't realize that they were of higher value and that they were about to disappear. So this is the case with French creams. This is a type of cookie that was made by Dare at the time. It was a simple commercial cookie, but it was covered with icing that was quite delicious. But the actual special part of it, was that it had inside some, people thought they were raisins, but actually they were not raisins. They were currants. They were real currants, dried currants that were in the biscuit, and it was just simply delicious. Unfortunately, in approximately 2017, if I remember correctly, these cookies were just eliminated from the Dare product line. To the great dismay of many consumers, they tried finding them on online stores, and then the stocks quickly dwindled away, and then there were absolutely no French creams available, and there still aren't today. Actually, it was so prized as a product that there were some people that initiated petitions for the return of French creams to the Dare product line. They submitted it to Dare product, but the company never showed interest, never said that they would produce the French creams ever again, even as a special edition, such as some other products that are occasionally launched. Vintage products such as Applejack cereals or Monster cereals that are sometimes reproduced as a vintage product, just as a special edition around, be it Christmas time or around various holidays, or sometimes in the summer. But no, French creams are definitely gone for good. Why? Because the currants cost much more than raisins, and the cost was very high because it was a kind of a quality product, and the profit margin was smaller, but it was sold at the same price as other cookies. So they had to cost cut this brand completely, unfortunately. This is the same thing that happened to a prize chocolate that was actually born in the United States, but that was a Canadian product. I'm talking about Cherry Blossom, and some people know that in 2025, unfortunately, Cherry Blossom just disappeared, and it's really a sad story because it was a great product. It was invented in 1890, so it wasn't like just a little candy invented last year. It was candy that was more than 100 years old, invented by a certain Walter M. Loney in Mansfield, Massachusetts. And so the production started, and what was it? It was simply a chocolate that had coconut inside it. But inside this, there was a kind of a sweet liquid with a cherry, or an actual real cherry in the middle. It was just unctuous, and it was just delicious. It's hard to describe. Special texture, special taste. It was very good if you had the need for a sweet chocolate. Even certain stars said that they appreciated it. Like, there's a legend that says that Madonna actually said that it was her favorite commercial chocolate. I don't know if that's true, but in any case, many people thought it was their favorite chocolate. But as you can guess, what happened was the production cost was too high. Why? Because there was an actual fruit in it, once again, a true cherry, and the cost went up. And unfortunately, the profit margin was too low. So even if the production had been in Canada for hundreds of years, it was produced in Sherbrooke, Quebec until 1989 by Hershey Canada. Well, Hershey Canada decided to eliminate the product, and even though it was a highly historical product, it just went away like HBC. Never to be seen again, unfortunately. This is why we can see on eBay, now they're all gone, but there used to be, so they were selling for $50 a pop. $50 for a small box of Cherry Blossom, which contains one chocolate, actually. This is gone now, so too bad for this Cherry Blossom, which was not necessarily a high luxury product. It was just a commercial chocolate that you could find at your local 7-Eleven, for example. But out of the other commercial products that were available, out of the other chocolate bars, this one was the one that cost the most to produce. So it was the first to go, and that's unfortunate. Which brings us to another product, and this is related to the Hindsight Chronicle. So we're now back on track and talking about another product that is still in existence. So this product is a product such as the French creams and the Cherry Blossom that was eliminated because the cost of production is actually quite high and the margin is very low. So it's tending to be eliminated, and it may disappear quite soon, but it's still living now, so I'd highly suggest you go and try it. And what product am I talking about? I'm talking about Orangina. Orangina. Did you ever hear about this highly romantic drink? So in the age of today's iced tea, sugar-free cola, and Monster energy drink, Orangina is somewhat of a UFO. It's an orange drink, but it's an orange soda, actually, but it's far from being Fanta. It's not an orange flavor product. It is a carbonated drink, but it's naturally not excessively sweet. And Orangina contains 12% real juice and also 2% real fruit pulp. And the original glass bottles have this drink that is made with real sugar, not high fructose corn syrup. But that's only in the original glass bottles, which are quite hard to find these days. So it's a very high quality drink for commercial soda. And it's related to the Mediterranean. It has an aura around it that is centered around the Mediterranean lifestyle. And this drink actually is related to 3 countries and 2 continents. So Spain, Algeria, and France all have a claim to the origin of this juice. Right now it is produced in France, but actually originally it was produced from an orange orchard that was situated in the Mitidja plains of Algeria. A French man that was called Léon Breton met with Augustin Triago Miralles, a Spaniard. He was a pharmacist from Valencia in Spain. And Mr. Miralles actually invented the Orangina formula 3 years before he met Breton. So Breton actually, bought the formula and started production of Orangina in 1936 from Algeria. And in 1961, the production moved to Marseille in France. And the marketing of the product always evoked the Mediterranean and the orange, and it had a certain aesthetic to it because there was some publicity posters that had a really unique aesthetic to it, as you can see on the screen right now. And all the subsequent posters always had this unique aesthetic element to it, which evokes lazily drinking an Orangina on a cafe or on a beach in Saint-Tropez, in Nice, or in the Côte d'Azur, or in the Costa del Sol, or even in Casablanca or in Istanbul, actually, which the products are still highly popular in. It's a wonderful product, and they even have different products lines, such as Orangina Sanguine, which is made with blood oranges and is absolutely delectable. Really delicious product. It's surprising that a commercial product can reach such high quality taste. But unfortunately, because of the very high production cost and the high quality ingredients, the lower profit margin, there is a lower and lower marketing investment in the product, and this is unfortunately causing many distributors to eliminate the product from their product line. Right now, for example, in Canada, it's still available, but many supermarkets have eliminated Orangina because there is no demand for it, or people did not hear about it, or there has been a kind of a marketing loophole, a marketing vacuum that has made newer generations unaware of what Orangina is and has always been. It's a product that has almost as much history as Coca-Cola, but is actually of much higher quality. So this is why I suggest to you to try to inquire all around you if you can find some Orangina. It's a really cool product and it's really fun to drink. It's refreshing and it evokes the beach. Try it and try to see about the history of Orangina and see if you enjoy the experience. So this actually is a salute to Orangina, which is still in existence today. And let's celebrate it if you can ever get your hands on a fresh bottle of Orangina. And remember, you always must shake the bottle before because of the pulp, which is in the bottom. You have to shake it so every gulp has an even composition of juice and pulp. It's a highly delicious experience. So there's the Hindsight Chronicle for Orangina, the stuff of legends. And we now arrive to the Splendor Show and Tell. It's now time again for the Splendor Show and Tell for the SOS Thoughtstream number 10. So in keeping with today's subject, we have a low-tech object. It's actually a quite specialized object. It's known as a book. This is an actual technology. Yes, it was a new technology when it first came out, and it still exists today. And just as new tech does not necessarily make old tech disappear, such as the vacuum cleaner that did not eliminate the broom, books are still relevant today, and they're quite an experience, mainly physical books. Actually, when there's a e-paper, e-reader to read a book on, it's quite a nice experience, and it's a calming experience. But the ultimate calming experience comes in the form of a physical book. And if you can even get your hands on an older book, it's even more interesting because recent books have a kind of bleach in them that makes the reader experience not the same, but older books have a different type of contrast and are very pleasant to read, as well as they get the imagination going on what the path of the book was before you actually got to it. So as you can see here, this is a property from an old English teacher that unfortunately passed away in June 2026. And this book is the Kon-Tiki. And so this book, actually, the Kon-Tiki, was a groundbreaking book in the 50s. It's actually not just a book, it's an adventure, but it's an adventure that really took place. and it's an adventure that took place in the 1940s after the Second World War. So it's a quite modern experience, and it's quite rare that we have literary renditions of an expedition in such a recent time. So what was the Kon-Tiki? In case you never heard about it, the Kon-Tiki is related to not only an expedition, but also it brought forth a mini aesthetic movement known as the Tiki phenomenon. So in the 1950s, well, more like in 1947, there's a Norwegian called Thor Heyerdahl that decided to go on an expedition on a raft with a few of his associates. And so a few scientists and Thor himself created this raft that was known as the Kon-Tiki, and they literally sailed around the world, ultimately to arrive in Polynesia, in the Tiki world, where we have the island culture that's quite present with its unique aesthetic. And so this expedition was documented when they went along, and unlike old expeditions of people like Magellan and Jacques Cartier, this occurred in the modern age, and he was able to take quite a few photographs while crossing the oceans, and so these photographs are present inside the book. It makes for kind of a new modern style adventure literary piece. So the story in this book, as you can see, documents all the voyages that they did, first to South America, then to Polynesia. It was quite a daring experience to go there without modern GPS technology. And they succeeded, all the while fishing some fish. Of course, I guess the Norwegian experience of Thor Heyerdahl may have helped, such as they are from the Viking culture and are used to sail the waves. And so these guys went all around, and they finally arrived and were received in Polynesia. They celebrated this culture, and it became quite popular at the time. And it even gave birth to a movement that we could see in its most visible form in what's known as tiki bars. And tiki bars were super popular in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, even maybe in the beginning of the 1980s, but they're almost all today gone. I remember my father gave me an old restaurant guide that was from the 1970s. It was restaurants in Montreal, and there was a few tiki bars there, which had the typical Tahitian aesthetic on all of the walls and all of the glasses, and it was quite impressive and a quite entertaining experience. They had tiki specialized drinks, of course. This is where the pina colada comes from. This still exists, but the tiki bars have all but gone. In Montreal, the last tiki bar probably closed down around 2010, unfortunately. So the tiki culture is all gone, but this is the book that actually gave birth to all the modern Western tiki culture, the unauthentic but interesting tiki culture that we can still see in some older motels on certain highways, and it's quite entertaining to watch. So if you were wondering where the tiki culture came from, it came from this book, the Kon-Tiki, which actually is quite rare and can get some quite hefty prices. If you have an actual signed copy of the original first print Kon-Tiki or second print, you can fetch $700 for it. It's actually on sale for $700. You can also, if you have an unsigned original copy, it can reach, if it's in good condition, between $50 to $100 actually. And so this is why these types of authentic books are a higher end reading experience. So this is a salute to not only the book, but all of the experience around the Kon-Tiki. The Kon-Tiki, the stuff of legends. If people would like to contribute an object to the Splendor Show and Tell, you can contact us also at info@statesofsplendor.com. And so this is if you have any object of value that you esteem that you think has a certain shard of splendor in it, or that emanates or represents a small part of splendor. It just has, it should have a little bit more than an only sentimental value. If this is the case, just take a few pictures or video and send it to info show at statesofsplendor.com under the title Splendor Show and Tell, and we'll be glad to showcase it, and we'll do some research and do a small expose on the object you submit, just like we did for the Kon-Tiki today. So this brings the States of Splendor Thoughtstream number 10 to a close. Hope you enjoyed the show. Stay tuned for our next show, which will be about storytelling. So that's all for today. Have a good night, have a good day, end of meal or end of drive home, and see you soon. Bye-bye.